Hey there, friend. Welcome to the Having a Mom Moment podcast. I am your host, Shannon Warner. This podcast is all about taking a few moments for yourself and reconnecting to the amazing woman behind the title of mom. You have so many plates spinning at any given time between your kids, your partner, your job, maintaining a household, etc., etc. But where does taking time just for you play into that? Let's spend some time together, you and me, right now. We're rebranding a mom moment to those sacred moments you take to fill your cup first. Let's connect, tune in, and tap into what makes us the incredible women that we are. We'll nurture ourselves first so we can be our best selves for those we pour into on a daily basis. We'll also bask in the beautiful wisdom of other moms to learn about the ways in which they've tapped into alignment in their own motherhood journeys. Come on, mama, it's your time. We're having a mom moment. Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Having a Mom Moment podcast. I am your host, Shannon Warner, and I am just so honored that you have taken your precious time to join us here today. It is the holiday season, and if you are a celebrator of Christmas, we are a week less than a week away. So merriest of Christmases to you and to your family, and I hope this time is filled with joy. And if it's not, I hope it's filled with a lot of grace and self-compassion. And I'm sending you lots and lots of love either way. Don't forget, if you are expecting to grab my free 18-page maternity leave planning guide, as well as the How to Fund Your Unpaid Leave 30-minute workshop, details for both of those are in the show notes. This week's guest is Dr. Emma Nagy. She is a pregnancy and postpartum mental health coach and creator of the My Lighter Motherhood program and host of the My Lighter Way podcast. Emma's focus is largely on preparing pregnant mamas for the postpartum period. However, I do think there is a lot of really good stuff in here about how we can rewire our brains, literally rewire our brains for a more joyful motherhood experience. So even if you're way past pregnancy and postpartum, but you know that you are deserving of more joy in your life, take a listen. There's some really good stuff in here. On to the episode. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me, Shannon. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. Can you start by telling us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Emma. I am a mental health and mindset coach for mums, and I have a business called My Lighter Way, where I support women from their transition through pregnancy into postpartum. And I have my doctorate in mental health promotion and 13 years experience in that research area. So I love to bring like a mental health prevention lens to everything I do and blend that with the mindset work, with the personal growth work. And I have a podcast too. So I am so happy to be on your podcast.
Yay. I love that so much. I think the mental health piece with moms is so important, which obviously you know, but it's like such a huge factor that either we grapple with or we need to pay more attention to.
Totally. And it's just hasn't been a big enough focus. So I think so many mums are struggling unnecessarily because we haven't really been supporting mums with their mental health as they become mothers and like in some of the most vulnerable times throughout motherhood. So that's why I'm just so grateful to be doing what I'm doing because there is such a big gap in that area. And I just see so much opportunity for like how can we support moms better? Like there is just such a huge opportunity there. So, and I'm just happy that more moms are valuing it too, like valuing that as like a key part of their health. So
Yeah, absolutely. I can't speak for Canada, but I've spoken to a few moms in Canada. You're based in Ontario. I can speak for the States. There's just not supports in place in the system. They don't exist. So it's like once you're in motherhood and you feel like you're over your head, that you're like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? And even then it can be really hard to get support. And what I
hate, but also love. I hate that it has to be this way, but it's seeing moms who are like, no, like we've got this. Like, I will build supports for you. I will be the point of information and support and wisdom and whatever you need, because it's not readily available within the system.
Yeah, it just hasn't been there. It's been like, even in Canada, I find it's like kind of like a checklist on a checkbox at your appointment. And it's
Yeah.
like, how are you doing? And like, and it's when things are bad, that's when the supports step in. There really isn't much out there around prevention. And that's like what I focus on, because I think a lot of our healthcare professionals just aren't trained in prevention. They're more trained on treatment and like recognizing, when alarm bells are going off and then giving support that way, which of course is so important. But the prevention part is like so exciting to me, because like we can all benefit from that. Like whether you've had poor mental health in the past, or whether you're just like a healthy mom and you just want to keep it that way, right? Like we do that with our physical fitness. We're like pregnant, we're like, okay, like I'm going to do prenatal classes, or I'm going to like, I'm going to get in good shape. But we don't really think to do that with our mental health. It's just like not something we've been traditionally doing.
You're so right. You're so right. And I love how you are saying, like, you may already be good. Like, let's continue to be good, because stuff comes up when you have kids. I've got two little ones. Mine, one is 6 and my other one is 20 months. So I've done this for a little while now, but still, you have these moments that sometimes seemingly come out of nowhere. So even if you are in a good space beforehand, stuff happens. Stuff happens in motherhood that can bring you to your knees.
That's so true. And like it happens to me. Like I have dips in my mental health sometimes. And I'm like, I literally went to school for this for so long. I know all the steps, but sometimes that happens. So I feel like that self-awareness is really key, as well as like knowing what helps you get out of it and like get back to your baseline. And I think as moms, it's really empowering for us to know how to do that, because then we can model it for our children, right? Like you have a 6-year-old, and like you would have gone through so many of like the emotional development stages already by that time. And I have like a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and just seeing them like work through all their toddler emotions and like do their own big transitions in life, where they start daycare and they start school. Like it gives you like a sense of confidence and like trust in yourself as a mom, to be able to be like, okay, I know how to like regulate myself. And like, just by being able to do that, I'm just modeling that to my kids. So when they're figuring that out, you can teach that to them, which I think is really cool.
So important. So important. Absolutely. And so much that comes up on the podcast, ironically, is not ironically, it makes total sense. Absolutely. I'm not surprised. But, it's like, yeah, whatever this guest comes on to talk about, I'm like, yes. And when you can do that and you can model it for your kids, like, that's so amazing. Like, just the impact that that's going to have on them for their whole life. When you show them, in this case, how to regulate yourself, like, huge.
Isn't that wild? It's like, it sounds dramatic, but it's actually true that it's making generational shifts.
Yes. I got goosebumps. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so exciting. And like, I find like when we work on ourselves, like I think when people think of mental health support or like working on your mental health, you think of like going to counseling and things that are really heavy. But I love to like add so much lightness into that. And I go to a counselor, but the other pieces that I do in my life are the things that have really supported my mental health on the day to day. And they're things like just doing things that light me up and like figuring out what that is. And like, I love being creative. So it's like making time to be creative. And I love like working on my business. So it's just like, there are so many ways, so many different things we can do to support our own mental health, way beyond like talking about your childhood in counseling. Right. And
absolutely.
And I just think when we live our lives in ways that, we invite joy in like every area, that helps our mental health. And like how cool to also be able to just be in that kind of energy and be in that space at home. And like, that's the type of home environment you're creating for your little ones. And it's just like how lovely for them to get to be in that energy and like they just are so naturally joyful. Like I know they
Yes.
have like ups and downs, but they are so naturally joyful. So it's just like exciting to spend more of our time and our energy in that like joyful state.
Right? Preferred method of time spent, I would think. Absolutely. And it's not always easy to get there and stay there because life happens. I get that for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love you. Yes, when you look at your kids, especially your little ones, are like their set point is to be happy and to follow their joy. Sometimes to the point of getting themselves in trouble, but that's like, yeah, that gratification piece they're after. I love that.
That's so true.
What does prevention then look like when you're working with mamas to be or new moms?
Such a good question. Yeah. So there's like a framework that I go through. So I'm like, maybe the listeners I'll like explain what I mean by this. So then it's like not so abstract, because there are like different levels of prevention. So we can like within ourselves, like there are things we can do, like beliefs we can have, expectations we can have, like healthy thought patterns, like emotional regulation, and like creating like healthy narratives around motherhood, and like there are all these things within ourselves. So that's like level or layer one. So there are things we can do within ourselves to prevent poor mental health. And we can go into some of these if you want to like
Yes,
round them in
please.
some
Let's go.
examples. Okay. So the first one that's like coming to top of mind for me, because there are so many different, like I just listed a bunch of different personal level things that we can do. For me, something that was a big focus for a while was around rewiring anxious thought patterns and increasing my self-awareness. And increasing my self-awareness is honestly like the one thing, like if the listeners are like, okay, what's like one thing I can do? Focus on increasing your self-awareness. And what I mean by that is like, just pay attention to yourself, pay attention to the types of thoughts you have, the types of beliefs you have about certain things that maybe we think are truth, but they're just simply beliefs that we have. And the cool thing is when you pay attention to your thoughts, your beliefs, your mood, your energy, you start to separate yourself from like, say, like you and the thought, for example. So say if you're like, I'm just going to watch my thoughts for the next like 5 minutes. And then you just start to pay attention to the types of things that you're thinking about, or maybe like you go into some kind of like anxious thought cycle. You just paying attention is creating a separation between you and the thought, and it's giving you power over that thought because you're like, oh, interesting. Like I was thinking about this. And that is so, so helpful to do, is just to bring that level of self-awareness to like how you're living your life, because from there, that separation and that power that you've just created allows you to potentially invite in something that could serve you better. So what I was doing before with anxious thought patterns, and now it's something I teach moms in pregnancy, like especially those who are already prone to anxiety, it's like start to pay attention to like the patterns that you have. Like maybe you're someone who like ruminates a lot, and like if something's bothering you, you go over like all the different scenarios in your head, and then you find that like drains your energy. You can start to notice that, and if you need to, rewire them or just like take their power away, which over the long term can just help you in so many different areas of your life. So that's like one example of like a personal level of like prevention that you could do. A lot of therapists help people with like this kind of thought reframing. Yeah, so that's just one thing within one level of like this prevention framework that I didn't develop the framework. It's called like the socio-ecological model, but I have like created my own framework for like motherhood and like for the newborn stage specific to prevention and preventing poor mental health. And the second layer is like the social environment around us. So that's like our relationships and our friendships and our family. Like it's like the interpersonal environment around us. And it just acknowledges that beyond us, like we're also like social creatures, and our social relationships also play a role in our mental health and like could support it or could harm it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
So
go
go ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say that's really interesting. That's a piece that I hadn't actually considered before. I'm very familiar with the first layer of, the awareness, which a lot of us
Yeah.
lack. And it's not a dig at anyone, but once you start to take notice of your patterns and your beliefs and the thoughts that you're having, y'all, it can change your life. Like I have been really kind of doing this
In
work
any
since the beginning.
area.
Yeah, I've been doing this work kind of since the beginning of the year. And I'm not a mom of a newborn. I've got a little toddler and an older one, but I'm just like, my world looks so different than it did at the beginning of the year. And I think this is part of it, is just the awareness. So you got
Isn't
to give
that
it
wild?
you have to give it a try. And the ability to choose a better feeling thought when you start to spiral, or you're having these icky feelings of like, okay, what is like one half step better feeling? Now that I have
Yes.
awareness, I don't want to feel like this. Like, what's one half step better thought that I could have right now?
I love that. And you're so right about that half step, because sometimes if you jump to the opposite, like if you're like, I feel terrible, to like, I'm so happy, and you just don't believe that, right?
Yeah.
Like your
Yeah.
subconscious doesn't believe it, it rejects it. So it might not necessarily be changing that thought pattern from happening. But like if you're like, I'm working on feeling happier in this moment, you can probably get on board with that, and that's probably aligned with your actual intention. So
Yeah.
that half step that you mentioned is super powerful. And
Yeah.
don't you find it fun?
Yeah. Yeah. To watch how easily it can shift. Cause I'm someone who used to spiral. I would just like nose dive right into whatever I was
Yeah.
in, and that's not helpful either.
It's so draining. That's what I find, like the times where I get sucked into that, it's so draining.
Yeah.
But the more you practice that awareness step, the faster
Mhm.
you notice when that's happening. And then the faster you can reframe it. And then that becomes your new normal. And that like repetition is what rewires that thought pattern from
Mhm.
happening and creates like a new reality for you, which is so wild.
Yeah. Well, and your beliefs are, you're the doctor here. So please correct me if my terminology is wrong, but like your beliefs are just, this repetition of thought that you've had over and over again to the point where you're
Yeah.
like, yep, that's my truth. Like, but at one point it started as a thought, and if we had checked that thought along the way, maybe we wouldn't be here, but you can also change it.
Totally. Yeah, you're so
Mhm.
right. And a lot of our beliefs stemmed from um people outside of us, like
Yeah.
watching or just listening to what our parents thought, say about like money when we were growing up,
Yep.
and like now we might have a certain money mindset or certain fears around like
Yep.
money or whatever. I'm like, you can apply this to every area of your life. Like if there's one area of your life that you're like, ooh, like I would love like my relationship to feel more connected, or I like want to work on an abundance mindset, or like I want to grow my business, or like whatever, like I want to, feel more calm, like when things in my home are chaotic, like whatever that is for you, like pick an area of your life and like you can start to make these tiny shifts that will make a huge, huge impact.
Yeah. You just hit on one for me that I hadn't thought about. And I immediately can think of the things that are feeding into it based on my family
Ooh,
experience. So
ooh, yeah, that's so
yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Like you said, any area, especially if it's something that you're like, I don't like the way this area of my life feels. I would like to up level in this area. There's probably something there that's
Yeah.
holding you back. And it's not your fault. We just accumulate these things as we go. And someone, I can't remember now, who gave the analogy of it's your garden, and most people are
Mm.
coming to plant beautiful flowers and things, but occasionally you get some weeds, and that's okay too. You just got to go in and clean them out.
Oh, I like
So
that analogy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is good, because generally your parents and your family, they mean well, but sometimes the beliefs that they pass on don't always serve us, or they're old fashioned and don't really work. I have a 96-year-old grandmother who I love to death. She's
Aw.
wonderful, but like some of her advice is not helpful, like, thank you. I'm sure that was really helpful in 1950 and 60, but not today. Not today.
Yeah. And the thing is too, like they were modeled that from their parents, right? And like even some of the the generations before us like weren't like loved on and like treated the same way as even tiny babies. So I think it's an exciting time to be a mom because like we're really valuing a lot of things that maybe we haven't had the chance to value before.
Yeah. You're not the first person to say that, and it excites me because I believe it too. And it's just like the impacts that we're going to have on our kids and their kids. It's really exciting for sure.
Yeah, it's really fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why doing the work is so important. Do it for yourself and then just imagine how it's going to play out for you. I love it. So you said second layer is social environment.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
So for people who, and I see this going around a lot of like, we're supposed to have a village. I don't have a village. Maybe I live out of state away from my parents, or maybe I don't have supportive family. Like, what do you suggest when maybe that landscape is a little rocky?
Yeah. I've actually been having some conversations lately with clients around this exact thing because what if we move away from our families and we have a baby or we have young kids, and like part of that to unpack often is making space for the grief that you might feel between the dissonance of like, this was my vision for having kids. And part of that vision included like my family there, or like, you know, this certain kind of life around us. So I think that grief sometimes like feels heavy within us.
Yeah.
You know,
I've never heard that piece before. So thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. Yeah. There's like a lot of nuances in some of this stuff. Like making space for that is really helpful. And then something else you can do is root like back into your values of like, okay, like what are you valuing for this time? Like what are the biggest values you're holding as a mom? And work on the pieces like you can control. So, you know, like maybe you value like just like being present with your kids and like being playful with them. And like that's like where more of your focus goes into. But another big piece is like a village is like we aren't meant to do it totally alone. And like our village is an important aspect, right? Like having someone to watch our kids sometimes so we can like go on a date night or like do something just for yourself, right? That might just involve some creativity when you live far away from someone. Like maybe, you know, it's not like the same as your ideal vision, but maybe just like manifest like the most wonderful, fun babysitter that like your kids are going to just adore being around, right? And maybe you like look out for that person or you become connected with that person in some way. Or maybe it's like planning, you know, a visit with your family and like when maybe they come and see you. And when you're there, maybe you have a conversation in advance and be like, I would really love to, you know, go out for dinner with my husband during that time. And then everyone's kind of on the same page before that weekend even happens. And you have like that thing to look forward to. And then they get like the grandparents or whatever get quality time with your kids. So it does take a bit more creativity to like feel connected to your family. But so like virtual isn't the same as in person, but we are lucky to like be able to be connected. And so I feel like there are some fun ways to remain connected with family that way and like make each other feel like you're in each other's lives. Like for example, I have two younger brothers and one of them moved to Australia. And so he is like the opposite end of the world to me. And he had his first baby 3 months after I had my second. So our kids are like the same age, which is so cool. And like, I wish that we could be like in the same neighborhood, like our kids growing up and like playing together. But I just see how happy he is in his life and how that was like the absolute best decision for him. Like he's just never been happier. So it's like within this, I'm so glad that we have like the opportunity to like, he sends me like videos and like pictures of his son all the time. And I get to do the same. And I feel like I still know what he looks like at every stage and what his little voice sounds like at every stage. And then like, we just plan really fun trips every couple of years to see each other. So like we still get to make just different memories. But I think it does involve like expanding our original vision sometimes and
Yeah.
being a little bit creative.
Yeah. And being okay that it's not like the typical, village or family unit that you may have expected. And I'm so glad you touched on like having a babysitter and acknowledging that paid help can be part of your village. It
Yeah.
took me literally until I would say this last year, and my older daughter had been in daycare the entire time because I was worked outside of the home. Um, Daycare is part of our village, and we know
Totally.
and love those teachers, and they're lovely and wonderful. And like, I mean, we moved states a couple years ago, but like our last day at that center, like the teacher came out, like the daycare director came out and gave us a big hug, and we were like
Aw.
crying, and it was like they were part of our village, and
Mhm.
that's all okay. It's all okay.
Yeah. Yeah, my kids are in daycare too, and I am like so thankful for those providers because they just
Yeah.
like show my kids so much love and like they do different activities than I would with them, and like it gives me the freedom and space to do other things that like to work and
Yeah.
like provide for our family in that way. And it's just, yeah, they're totally part of my village. I'm like so
Yeah.
thankful for them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think if that was a more accepted view, that maybe there would be less stigma around people sending their children to daycare. People have been sending their children to daycare for a long time. I'm a product of daycare and I turned out okay. And I love daycare, so
Yeah, I think it's like such a personalized thing. And for me, like in a perfect world, or in my perfect world, I shouldn't say in a perfect world, in my perfect world, I would have like had my kids in daycare like 3 days a week, and like had them home like maybe an extra 2 days. But
Mhm.
my job like just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So like that's something else that I had to like kind of grieve and also like work on accepting more because I
Mhm.
was feeling a lot of dissonance in myself about that.
Yeah.
But I've like really shifted more into that. And I feel like a lot more at peace with where I am because I always go back to like my biggest value, and it's just to be present. It's like to be here for it all. So it's like, okay, even when I'm working 5 days a week, like how can I still be present through it all? And it just makes me so much more intentional with my
Mhm.
time and with my energy when I'm with my kids. And I still feel like I'm there for it all. Like I still have like I play with them every day. Like I cuddle with them every day. Like we have we have so many like moments together every day, and like I have the freedom to take extra vacation time like and spend extra days with them when I want to. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think there's a lot, especially I think of like mums in the States who don't have as long a maternity leave as we do here in Canada.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I imagine there is a lot of grief, or I know there is a lot of grief that many moms face around like going back to work when you would want to be spending more time with your kids. And it's a
Yeah.
tough one.
It is tough. And I mean, that's a whole conversation in itself. But the piece where, we're still healed. I went back at 6 weeks with my first and I was not healed.
Wow.
I did not have a C-section and I still was not healed. And it's,
Yeah, you wouldn't
so
be
there's a,
physically healed at that
yeah,
point, let alone
yeah,
emotionally. Like,
yeah. So I think that just that you said, allow there to be grief, and honor the grief and move through it. And I think that's huge because I think we're really good at like just stuffing the feelings down and like putting on our big girl pants and like doing the things that we have to do because we have to do them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And letting
it's
it all be
true.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think like looking at our feelings, like being brave enough to do that, it does take some vulnerability to be able to do that. And I think that's it's like what we talked about earlier with like kind of the ripple effect and like showing our kids, how to like handle certain emotions and stuff. Like grief is one of those uncomfortable emotions that we all experience at some point in our life. So to be able
Mhm.
to like hold space for ourselves is really important because when our kids go through difficult emotions, like we can feel safe being there for them through those emotions. We won't make them like shove their feelings down and like bottle them up and like, or just like go into fight or flight mode and like turn off from their feelings.
Mhm.
Like they'll be like, okay, like this is what I'm feeling. And like, this is how I can work through it. And like you do that by asking yourself in those moments, like, what do I need right now? It's like such a simple question, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're feeling an uncomfortable emotion, it's like, okay, what do I need right now? And then giving
Mm-hmm.
it to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's so simple, but it is so impactful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
And making
It
the
is.
time and the space for yourself to do so, which
Mm-hmm.
is easier said than done. Sometimes I understand, but so necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a practice too, just
Yeah.
like getting used to doing that. Being like, yeah, I get to
Yeah.
give things to myself. Like it's kind of like reparenting yourself sometimes, like as a parent,
Yeah.
which is kind of wild. Like that's something I didn't really expect when I became a mom, that I'd be like reparenting myself and like healing all these different things from like my childhood and my past and like just things in my life that maybe I didn't process fully.
Mm. Yeah.
So motherhood brought
I
that
for
out.
sure want to come back to that. We're coming back to that. Definitely.
Okay.
Is there anything else in your framework that you want to share about preventative? Because I'm looking back at this, I'm
Ah.
done having babies and I'm like, wow, this would have been so good to have looking back at my own experience. So
Mm.
what else prevention wise might you suggest?
The other layer is community.
Okay.
So it's like broader than just like your immediate interpersonal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Your like it's like your environment around you. So it could be like your home environment, it could be like your community environment, like the types of supports that are available to you. And like some people, if you think about like even like some neighborhoods aren't set up for you to like live a healthy, thriving life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there is such like a cultural, like there are just so many different factors that relate
Yeah.
to that. I won't go into like a whole thing
Yeah.
around that, but the point is that our environment is really important for our mental health too.
Mm-hmm.
So just considering that and then trying to seek out the supports in your community that might be really beneficial for you and like support your mental health and like putting those in place. That's a
Mm-hmm.
really lovely thing you can do for prevention too. Like it might even be like a yoga class that's like takes you like, like
Yeah.
physical activity. Like our bodies are just like so interlinked. Our physical isn't separated from like our emotional or our mental health. Like everything's all
Yeah.
interrelated. So yeah. And like being in nature, like our actual environment, like that's like so good for our mental health
Yeah.
too.
And thinking through some of these things, our experiences in motherhood are all very individualized and it can be different from one child to the next. You never know what's going to come up for you. But if you're thinking through these things beforehand, and even if you don't have a game plan per se, but you're like, oh, I've thought about this. So when
Yeah.
I come to this experience where I need some support, I've already kind of thought through this beforehand.
Yes. That's the whole point. Like everything, I have a program called the My Light to Motherhood program, and it goes through like this prevention model, but in a way that's like fun. Like you're
Yeah.
actually like learning about all the different things like within your own life. Like what are the personal things you want to put in place? Like what are the things in your relationships that you want to have like rock solid? Like what are the things like how can you create like a home environment that's going to feel like calm and like this like hug, like this protective bubble for
Mhm.
you guys to just all be in? And not only do I help you like learn about it, but it goes deeper into like that embodiment work. So it's like
Mm.
you're practicing and living these things in pregnancy. Like you are like setting your mental health up to thrive in pregnancy. So you go into motherhood feeling good, which is not only good for first time moms, but mums who have gone through it before and had a difficult time and want it to be better this time, or mums that have had a great time before, but this time they want to focus them on themselves and their own self-awareness and their own self-connection in pregnancy. So it kind of like meets you where you're at, but it includes like I was talking to a client the other day and now she has a 3-month-old baby, which is like so sweet. And
Aw.
she was just saying like she tells all her pregnant friends about this because she's like, there are conversations in here, there are things that I did in pregnancy I would not have thought of otherwise. And I'm like, I'm so glad. And she was just like saying how she put certain things in place, like certain boundaries in place, like had certain
Mm.
conversations with family before having her baby. And she's like, that helped me so much through the newborn stage. Cause
Mm.
yeah, like they're just things that they don't cover in prenatal class, right? They're not, it's like education
No.
focused. They don't go
Yeah.
deeper into like the embodiment work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't speak for Canada again, but here in the States, you don't have to take any kind of education. Zero. I think before
Yeah.
we left the hospital, they're like, watch these videos and like do the checklist before you leave with the baby. And it's
In
like,
the hospital with
yeah,
your brand new baby
yeah,
after you've just given birth, you're watching
yeah.
something?
Yeah, so you've
What?
got, yeah, they've got it's gotten pretty techy. Interestingly, like having almost 5 years between my kids, the technology has changed a little bit,
I
but
bet. Yeah.
they're just like, go on the TV in the hospital and like find this video and like watch all 12 minutes. And it's
What?
usually like infant CPR and like don't shake your baby. Those are like the main ones that I can remember. And then the other
Okay.
ones are like optional, but like nothing is required otherwise.
Right.
And even then no one's
Even
like
then,
watching you over your shoulder to make sure you do it,
that's not the time to learn.
No,
That's not the time our
no,
brain is taking in
no,
information. What?
no. But I keep having this conversation with people who are like, here in the States, to get a driver's permit, you have to do like all of these hours of like classroom training and then car training with a certified instructor, and then I forgot the
So true.
actual the timeline of it all, but like all of the work that you have to do just to get a driver's license. And then you start with like a provisional, I don't know what they call them. It's not even like your full driver's license. You have to drive for so long to get like the
Yeah.
full driver's license. And instead you get pregnant and then just hand you a baby and make sure you check the box that you watch the shaken baby video, and it's like
Oh
what
my
you're
gosh.
talking about should be like required reading. You know what I mean? Like this should be required work.
I know. I hope it somehow becomes that one day, because I
Yeah.
just think so many of us could benefit from it. And like in Canada, we have prenatal education classes. We have some of them that are free, or you can have like paid ones. And they go over the basics of like breastfeeding, like how to take care of a newborn and like all of those things, which I think are really, really important
Of
because
course.
it does make you feel more prepared. But everything is so focused on the baby and everything's knowledge level. And like while it's really powerful to be educated and informed, because then like say you have like a new baby and they're waking up many times in the night, you're like, okay, like I know this is normal, right? You're not like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
what's wrong? You're like, you know what
Right.
to expect. Like you're like, okay, this is what a baby does.
Right.
But what we get education wise doesn't make us feel better in those moments. Like just because I know it's normal for the baby to wake up lots of times, like doesn't mean you're like feeling great about it. So
Right.
that's
Right.
like the work that I do helps you like feel better in those moments and like goes that step deeper than education.
Mhm.
So that you like feel like you can respond confidently in those moments and like
Yeah.
come from that self-regulated, grounded,
Oh my
calm
gosh.
place. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So important for sure. And those beginning months of like no one's sleeping, everything is chaos, like I remember having some very ugly moments with my husband, who is generally like so even keeled, so easy to get along with, hardly ever are like just easy, easy, easy. But I remember, we're both, trying to share baby responsibilities. It's the middle of the night. We're exhausted. And like one person says one thing and it's just like, because you're exhausted and you can't regulate. You're just not, you think you're prepared, but until you're living that existence for weeks on end, like you're not prepared. And if you have some of these tools beforehand to pull out of your little toolkit in
Yeah,
those moments.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so helpful because then like yeah, like I still can't believe that you just said about that like 12-minute video after you've just had a baby. And I'm just like, that is not the time that our brain is going to take in
Oh
anything
my
useful. And
gosh.
I'm like, that's why it's so valuable to do it in pregnancy and like reduce the mental load in the postpartum period and
Yes.
like have some conversations that are going to help you like you said, it sounds like you guys had such a strong foundation
Oh
and like
yeah.
a normally like harmonious relationship.
Absolutely.
So, and
Yeah.
like babies bring out stress in our relationships, like especially
Yeah.
in like the first year or first 18 months after having a baby. Um, so just like, yeah, having like a strong partnership through that and like always like coming back together and those is
Yeah.
like really, really
Yeah.
powerful too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And perhaps had I been prepared to better regulate myself, at that time, because I hadn't, you know?
And it's like the
Yeah.
most challenging time to regulate ourselves
Yeah.
because like our
Yeah.
hormones, right? Like we have been
Yes.
going, our bodies have gone through so much. So that's another piece too that I love to talk about is like our mind body connection and like bringing
Mhm.
self-awareness to that and like strengthening that connection because sometimes like if our mental health dips, for example, it could be like something going on in the body. So it's just good to be able to pay attention to that. But yeah, our hormones, like our bodies go through so many different changes. We aren't sleeping, and sleep is like a huge part of being able to self-regulate and like
Yeah.
function and like think like properly and like
Yeah.
feel better emotionally. Like so all of it just so many things make the newborn stage like this vulnerable time.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, how can we make this time better? Because I feel like the newborn stage just has such like a bad reputation, you know, like so many people
Yeah.
are like, oh, I would want to have another baby, but I don't want to go through the newborn stage again. So it's like, okay, how can we make this easier for ourselves?
Yeah. And I had learned with our age gap, I had blocked a lot of that out entirely. You know, I was like,
Oh
I
yeah.
remember it. And then I got back in and I was like, I do not remember this. I blocked this out completely because this part is not my favorite. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which part did you find like the most difficult, or which part like wasn't your favorite?
So I was personally not wanting to direct feed. I didn't want to nurse. I knew that about myself. It's not a trauma thing. For me, idea made me uncomfortable. I learned about exclusively pumping, went that route with my first, and decided to do it again with my second. And it was just, I forgot like juggling the pumping schedule with the sleep and the feeding and all the pieces. Oh, and now I have another kid on top of it. You know, I was
Yeah.
like, I don't remember this piece being this much of a drag, you know?
Right.
And so that in particular, that piece, and just again, the
Yeah.
sleep, I'm like, I feel like we slept more. I feel this second baby, it took her longer to sleep longer stretches more consistently. So
Right. Yes,
sleep.
that's true. Babies are so different in that
Yeah.
way too. And it can like
Yeah.
completely shift how much energy you have. And like, yeah,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
I think it's probably harder if you like have a better experience sleep wise the first time than the second time you
Yeah.
had it. 'Cause you're like, oh, you like can sense like the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Your
Yeah.
body remembers that you were exhausted, but not quite that exhausted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
was older, you know, it was like I said, almost 5 years. I'm not the same person I was.
Right. Yeah. And you have another child too,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
definitely like adds more. Yeah. The sleep was something for me the first time around that I anticipated being the most challenging, and it definitely was one of them.
Yeah.
Um and then the second time was actually a lot better for me. But like I think one of the things that really 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 helped me the second time was I'd gone down like the personal growth like route and taken so many courses myself and like learned about my energy and like what kind of energy I have and like how to protect it. And I think that was really
Mm.
important. And like
Yeah.
that is something I now teach moms because I'm like, this didn't exist. Like there's nothing that talks about like energy and
No.
like how to protect your energy and stuff. Like I just think
Yeah.
that's so cool. I like love that
Oh,
whole
that
topic
sounds
area.
so good. Oh my gosh,
So
that could be a
fun.
whole episode in itself right
I
there. I
know.
love that. I love that. I want to circle back because I said let's put a pin in it, but like talking about your own motherhood journey and something you were saying you weren't expecting, you know, a
Yeah.
certain area to come up for you. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I was not expecting was like how it would awaken like my like desire, or like it's not even just a desire. I just like feel like so strongly towards like my own personal growth and like my
Mm,
own personal development. And like part of that was like healing things from the past that I hadn't really processed.
mm,
Like I
yeah.
just wasn't expecting motherhood to bring all of this stuff up in me. I had no clue, but I feel like as a mom, it's like my responsibility to like do that work within
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Um, but like an example of something that I feel like recently I just got to like a whole other layer of healing, which was just so good, is I moved from Wales. I was born in Wales and grew and spent my childhood there.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
going to ask about the accent. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah. I've been in Canada for a long time. Like I just turned
Okay.
35 the other day. And
Okay.
so I've been here for most of my life. But I really, like, I remember Wales so clearly. Like, I, had spent my whole childhood there, and I had like my little best friends, and we lived in a home, like my parents and my brothers and I, with my grandfather on a farm. And when we moved to Canada, my grandfather stayed there. So it's like
Oh,
he was kind of like a third parent to me. Like, I grew up in
yeah.
his house, right? And so it was a huge, huge change, just out of your control as a child, to be like, we're moving countries.
Yeah.
Um, so that was something that I feel like I just didn't have the capacity to process well enough as
Yeah.
an 11-year-old. And I didn't really realize that I'd been kind of like holding on to that, but like it was kind of like a trauma in my body, I think, and like big changes in our lives, or even just like whatever they don't even have to be big changes, but sometimes our bodies internalize things as trauma, and our bodies
Yeah.
like remember emotions, and our bodies remember, certain experiences in our life. It's a protective mechanism. Like, that's why our bodies do this. But I just wasn't really realizing that it was still showing up in my life in certain ways, until I started just doing, just like understanding like my thought patterns and my beliefs. So like maybe areas I was holding myself back in, like my business, or just like showing
Mm.
up authentically and vulnerably, or like all of these things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like almost like a younger part of me is like still protecting me in some ways,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I've just been like working over the years on like healing like different layers. And then recently I had a coaching session with a coach who was like such an incredible coach. And he like reflected back to me. He's like, kind of something along the lines, I don't remember how he said it, but it was like a sentiment like I kept like putting the backpack back on by
Mm.
keeping going back and like healing different things within it. And he's like, you could just like choose to like take the backpack off. And I was like,
Mm.
what? And like be done with that. Decide you've healed that.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
Wow.
what? And he's like, he showed me this really cool like energy practice where he got me to like tune into my heart, like get out of my head, because I'm like in my head a lot. So he got
Yeah.
me to like go into my heart and like imagine it just like shining like anything related to heaviness around that, and like shining light all over it. And I just
Mm.
felt like this powerful shift within me. And then since then, I've just like, I've let that go. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Like,
Yeah.
that's just like one tangible example of something that happened recently. It's like, I never would have thought I would be doing things like that in my day
Yeah. Right.
as a mom. Like, I just
Mm.
never would have thought that I'd be like, just like healing and like working on parts of myself in this way.
Right. You don't ever imagine that being a thing. Like, when are you gonna have time amidst the bottles and the diapers and the this and the that and the loose teeth and whatever else you've got going on?
The
Yeah.
loose
I
teeth.
mean, yeah, I gotta do the inner work here now on top of all of this. But yeah, it brings a lot of stuff to light for sure. And for me, my experience, I've got two girls, and a lot of this is like, I am not going to let this continue for them. I'm not going to let them repeat my
Mm.
patterns of like playing small and like being afraid to take up space and not letting my voice be heard, because I'm not helping me, I'm not helping them, I'm not helping the collective of women my age and little girls and whatever. And it's just like, I have to do the work and do the growth so that they feel safe to show up and take up space and use their voice and everything else like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's amazing.
here we are doing the work. But you know what? It's like, I don't know if you listen to Kathy Heller, but
I
Kathy
don't.
Heller's, you have to check her out. I think you'd like
Okay.
her. But Kathy Heller's grandmother lived through the Holocaust. She's Jewish. Lots of loss and everything else. And she just talks about everything that her grandmother went through, and like how what happened to her and how she came out on the other side. Like, she's where she is today because of that, and then her mother and everything else.
Mm.
And she says, we stand on the shoulders of giants, like all the work, whatever the experiences were that our mothers and grandmothers and so on and so forth have gone through, like we stand on their shoulders, and then we have to shine forward for our girls or our children and their
Aw.
children, to live on in what we've gone through and we've grown through. So it's like, so powerful to think
It's
about.
so
Like,
powerful. And like you said, it's like, where are we supposed to find this time for us, like in between
yeah,
everything? But
yeah.
it's like, it is so our responsibility. And like, I would encourage like anyone listening, it's like, find like this work sometimes can be heavy because yes, sometimes if you're like holding on to something that maybe is like holding you back, it's like you have to do some shadow work. But
Yeah.
find like the people or like the communities or like the women who bring light to it. Because like
Mm,
even though a lot of it's been heavy, it's like it's been also so healing to be in like different spaces with women who are
yeah.
like supporting you through these things and like showing you the way through it and like holding space for you. And like I found like even like I'll listen to a podcast on like my drive into work, right? I'm driving to work anyway, and I'll like listen
Yeah.
to something around personal growth, around like, like whatever. Like I have some favorite podcasts that I listen to, and it's just like I find that fun. It's like me time, or it's like last night I was, folding the laundry and I was like listening to my mentor who's like a coach for business, like for moms
Yeah.
who are entrepreneurs. And like I was like watching a video from her, and it's just like I just fit it into my life because I enjoy it. And then
Yeah.
like it just kind of becomes part of your internal dialogue when you have these tools to like bring awareness to certain things and like shift certain things. And it just becomes like a way, it just takes seconds. Like it's not like this time consuming
Right.
thing.
Right. And the more you practice it, the easier it gets. For
Totally.
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I love all of that. You have a lot of wisdom, but if you could give one piece of advice to another mother at any stage in motherhood, you can choose, what would it be?
Mm, I would say like prioritize your own self connection.
Mm-hmm.
You
So
know?
good.
Yeah, prioritize your own self-connection. It's like when you have that, you can like figure out what you need and when. Like you can figure out, what in your life you get to focus on and like up level. Like you get to just like figure out what you need to like live more joyfully. And like that just overflows to everyone around you. So it's like the
Yeah.
like least selfish thing to prioritize your own connection with yourself.
Yeah. I know it feels so selfish, but it's so not. It's the complete opposite. Yeah. Because when
Yeah.
I say it all the time on here, so the listeners hear it, but I'm going to say it again. Like when you take care of you first, you're taking care of your kids, you're taking care of your partner, you're taking care of your community, your relationships. Like you have to be full first.
I
Yeah. So
love that.
important.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like such a great thing to just like, I think, repeat over and over and over again. So I
Yeah.
love that you say that here.
Yeah, yeah. We're done with mommy martyrdom. Like no more and no more mom guilt. Like there's no space for it anymore. We can't continue the way we've been going. It's just not serving anyone. And it just leaves
I
us
agree.
completely depleted and worn out. And what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's way more
Mm.
fun to just love it, right?
Yeah.
Like love our
Yeah.
lives. It's way more fun.
Yeah. We deserve it. We so
We
deserve it.
do. We do.
So what is one way or a couple ways you can choose? How do you reconnect to yourself in motherhood?
Mm, I follow my curiosity.
Ooh.
Yeah. So this has like led me to so many good places throughout my whole motherhood journey. Like, for example, like in pregnancy, but like my first pregnancy, I just like followed my curiosity and like, can I even have a positive birth experience? And like, I
Mm.
just like learned so many new things, like read the right books, like listened to the right mentors, like listen to the right meditations. And like, I shifted from being afraid of birth to feeling excited about it, or like
Mm.
right now I'm following my curiosity when it comes to like my business and like growing my business and being like, how can I support more moms and like, getting my own business mentor and like being in a mastermind. Like for me, it's like so fun to have something for me to like plug
Yeah.
into a couple times a month, or like
Yeah.
sometimes it's like once a week. Like it's just, yeah, like that's just one area of my life out of many, like home design, like all these different things that light me
Yeah.
up. I'll just like follow my curiosity, and like that brings me so much. It always brings me to the best places.
I love that so much. I heard from she was referring to hobbies, but she was saying, I keep a list of things that I want to try because, you think of something and then it's gone the moment you're distracted by this thing over here. So maybe,
Yeah.
making yourself, because I think, I'm curious about that, but I forget. So
Yeah.
maybe make a list. I'm talking to myself. This is advice for me, but if it works for you too, make a list of those things. I love that. I have not heard that answer before. I really love that though. Yeah. And think about your kids and their childlike curiosity, like
Oh
what
my
wonder
gosh.
they have.
It's
Yeah.
so true. It's like to learn or to access that within ourselves. It's like, yeah, just like spend a few seconds. Like it doesn't even be minutes. It's like spend a few seconds watching your kids. Like that's like all they do. They just like, there's something that piques their curiosity, like usually right in front of them. And then they just like follow that. And then like it leads to the next idea. And then it leads to the next idea.
You're so
fun.
right.
Yeah.
You're so right. I love that so much. So please tell us where we can find you, how people can work with you. Tell us all the things.
Amazing. So if you love listening to podcasts, which I'm guessing you do, if you're listening to this podcast, you can check out mine. It's the My Lighter Way podcast. And it's just on all the regular platforms where you can find podcasts. And I have like a free gift for the mums who are expecting, who are listening, about envisioning their empowered motherhood. And it's like the best self-reflection prompts to like ask yourself to create like a motherhood experience that you're actually really in love with.
I love that.
And so I'll leave the link with you for that. And I also have the My Lighter Motherhood program for any moms who want to go deeper than the education piece and like embody a present, calm mom who just like loves her experience from the start. So I can give you that link too.
Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes. That sounds so good. I think required reading. I think as a mom, like this is required work. We need to just tear down the whole system, start over.
Yeah, just add it, even get started by adding to it, like just add this one piece for you, I always say to moms, like put on your baby registry. Like so many people would be like,
yes,
what can I give just for the mom? That's actually like so useful. So I'm like, put that on your registry,
I love that so much. I love that so much because you will end up with way too many burp cloths and way too many onesies that will only fit for 3 months max. Like do something for you. I love that so much. Yeah, it's so good. I'm so excited you came on. I'm so excited that you shared all your wisdom with us. And I'm so excited that you're out there doing this work and supporting new mamas because they need it. They need it.
Thank you so much. I had the best time talking to you.
My pleasure. I had so much fun too. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you again, Emma, for being here. If you are expecting, be sure to check out Emma's resources, and all of her links are in the show notes. And also don't forget the Mat Leave Social virtual maternity leave community is coming in January, and my one-to-one maternity leave mentorship is also available. Those links are also in the show notes. If you're loving the podcast, it would mean so much if you would leave a review and follow if you have not done so already. It helps push the algorithm to spread the word about the podcast. And I can see the numbers on my end. I can see that it's working. So thank you so much to those of you who have already done so. Until next time, come hang out with me on socials at Having a Mom Moment on Instagram and also on Facebook. And if there's something you'd like to hear about in a future episode, you can shoot me a DM on either platform or send me an email at havingamamoment@gmail.com. In case no one has told you today, you are amazing, you are loved, and I'm so proud of you. Have a beautiful day.